When you think of the Austrian Grand Prix, you immediately think of the Österreich Ring, or the A1 Ring, or the Red Bull Ring, or whatever you want to call it. This track is the quintessential Austrian Grand Prix Formula 1 venue, full of history, prestige, and every other quality that Zeltweg did not possess. Wait, hang on a second. What is Zeltweg? So for those of you blissfully unaware of the history of the Formula 1 Grand Prix in Austria, let me give you the skinny. What we now call the Red Bull Ring has played host to 31 Formula 1 Grand Prix, but it was not the first track to host the Formula 1 Grand Prix of Austria. Instead, that honour belongs to another venue, situated all the way across the road, at the Zeltweg airspace. But I mean, you can be forgiven for not knowing anything about this place. This circuit was as bad as my videos. Let's get started on the history of the track itself, shall we? The airbase was built in 1959 for Austria to harbour their military, as despite the fact that Austria had declared themselves as a neutral nation, they still felt the need to develop an air force just in case Liechtenstein came knocking to steal their lawn. Not long after the airbase was built, somebody thought it would be a great idea to host some motor racing on it. Those that pledged this idea were romanticising over the success that was Silverstone in the UK. Unfortunately, this airbase would not be the glittering success that Silverstone was for a couple of reasons. I'll get back to this. The layout of the circuit was completed via an Etch-a-Sketch and 10 minutes of given time. Yeah, Avis may have been more simple, but at least that thing had some monster banking on it. It was a shitty ride if you got it wrong. But the people of Zeltweg didn't have much to work with, so you can't give them too much crap. There's honestly not a lot to the circuit, other than a bunch of 90-degree right-handers, a left-hand sweeper, and a few straights in between. And back in 1964, they were turning in 1 minute 9 second lap times in qualifying. The history was just as short as its length. Speaking of which, let's get on to that. The first Grand Prix to be held on this circuit was in 1963, although note this was a non-championship event. But being the 1960s, it still meant all the heavy hitters were there. Jack Brabham, Jimmy Clark, Chris Amon, Jochen Rindt, just to name a few. Brabham would go on to win this barnstorm of a race by 5 laps. Yikes, and we think the Mercs dominate today. Although when you diagnose what happened during this race, it does become clear as to why this happened. I mean, along with the fact that Brabham could hustle a car around a track about as well as anyone from the upside down nation of Australia could ever dare to, the track was littered with ruined, mangled cars. But why was it? Why was this simple, seemingly boring track becoming a barren wasteland of engine components and Castrol R? Well, that brings us back to the construction of the circuit itself. The majority of the surface of the airfield was constructed using concrete slabs. Whilst these slabs were initially smooth and neat, over time it would prove to be pretty problematic. Deterioration meant that gaps were starting to appear, some quite large, and even having varying elevation between each other. Being a military airfield, this was of no problem to the normal traffic of planes, but for Formula 1 machinery, this was seriously not cool. It was like trying to play rugby on concrete against some Tongans. Somebody gonna get hurt. As a result, the cars were being shaken to bits, and cars of this period were already brittle enough. But this wasn't enough to deter the Formula 1 circus from coming back to Zeltweg. The following year, in 1964, Zeltweg would play host to the first ever Austrian Grand Prix to be on the Formula 1 calendar. Qualifying was remarkably close for the time, but the race was a kick back to reality. Well, kind of. The track was ridden with transmission fluid, pieces of engine, and a makeshift barbecue courtesy of Phil Hill. Cars were strewn across the track, battered and bruised, whilst those that continued were many laps behind, save for 2, Lorenzo Bandini and Richie Ginther. Bandini would take a 6.2 second win over Ginther, his only win in his Formula 1 career, and it would also be the last time Formula 1 would ever race on this airfield. Yeah, this history lesson may be a bit brief, but that's because it was that brief. There wasn't a lot to this circuit. The circuit would host some sports car events as well as some local stuff too, but after only a few years more, it was handed back to the military. Years later, little remains of the circuit, although this isn't like Hockenheim. People may cry about the fact that the tarmac has been torn up at Hockenheim, but I don't think anyone's losing any sleep over Zeltweg's plastic surgery. The criticism of the surface was not unknown at the time, and plans were being drafted for an alternative. These plans would ultimately culminate in what we know today as the Red Bull Ring. So if you do attend the Austrian Grand Prix in the future, maybe stop by the airfield just across the road, because it's there that you'll find the place that, in effect, gave us one of the best circuits on the calendar. Or, I mean, hey, I really don't give a f***.